Hey everyone, welcome to DevOps Journey. So today we're going to look at ChatGPT and its capabilities around being able to create a DevOps pipeline for us. So we're going to be using GitLab as our platform, and we're going to see whether ChatGPT can suggest a basic template pipeline for us to be able to build a node project and deploy it as a container into the GitLab image registry. So if you're not familiar, ChatGPT is a large language model trained by OpenAI, and it's freely available as a preview for users to try on. So it can generate a lot of text for you, and it's a conversational bot, so it'll be able to have natural language conversations. So let's see whether it's able to help us in our DevOps journey. So I've created an account with OpenAI, and I'm in the chat prompt now. So what we're going to do is we have a sample app created using Node.js Express project template from GitLab, and it's got a Docker file here. So we don't have a GitLab-ci YAML yet. So what we're going to do is ask ChatGPT whether it can provide us with a YAML template. So let me ask it this standard question. So what I'm essentially doing is asking it an indirect question around how do I build this image and then post it to GitLab registry. So it's given me some answer around we need to create a GitLab-ci YAML, which is accurate, and we need a build job, very good, and then we need to push, and we need to run docker push. So it's given me a template, which is really good. So this example contains an image tag using the latest Docker image, and we need to enable Docker in Docker service, which is accurate. And I think this is assuming that we're using a shared GitLab runner. So let's copy this code and create a pull request or update our repository. All right, so we're going to create a new file called gitlab-ci.yml. Paste this template that we just copied from the console, and we're going to let it run. So let's push this directly to master for now. And we are going to go back to project. Okay, so let's look at our pipeline. Immediately, we can see that this pipeline has failed because there was a X mark on the top right. So let's see what the problem is. So the chosen job stays doesn't exist. Okay, so immediately the pipeline's failed because it's trying to use the stage build and push, but these stages haven't been defined. So let's paste this error, and we're assuming that in this example we don't know anything about GitLab YAML, and we're trying to learn using ChatGPT whether it can teach us about GitLab YAMLs and whether it's going to be a better tutorial tool. Okay, so now it's given me specify a valid stage for push, or remove the stage property altogether. So it's quite random. So the error message is pretty clear. The chosen stage doesn't exist. Stage that doesn't exist. So it's identified the problem, but it hasn't really given me a proper so available stages are pre-build, test, deploy, and post. Okay, so it doesn't have a push push stays by default. So what it's telling us is it doesn't have, these are the only default stages that we have. So what it suggested us is using stays deploy or remove the stays altogether so that it can be put to test stays. So let's use the deploy stays for now. So deploy. So when you initially look at the response, it doesn't make sense, but when you read through the entire response, it does kind of make sense. And it's initially it gave us a pipeline with a build and push, but when we commented with the error we get, it's tried to correct that error. So let's see. Okay, so it's been pushed. Now the pipeline is running. So we've asked it to give us a template for pushing our Docker container into GitLab repository. So GitLab container repository. So let's see whether it actually gets the job done. So there's a bunch of errors. So this job has succeeded. So successfully tagged. So it's managed to build and also tag it as a proper repository. Let's see whether the push or whether the deploy because it's actually deploying. It actually says deploy, but we're only pushing it to a container registry in GitLab. So we hit another roadblock, which is it's trying to push an image that it doesn't actually exist. And what I mean by that is this build job was created an image in a different container or a different runner, and in a new job it's trying to push that container image into GitLab registry. But the problem is that second job is running on a different runner, and hence it doesn't have access to that container. So let's see whether we can copy and paste this error, and then it will be able to identify the problem. Okay, so it's talking about being able to correctly tagging the image. So I think it's forgotten the context that we're inside a GitLab runner. Doesn't exist. So it does know why the error is there. The error simply means the image doesn't exist. So it's able to identify that, but the root cause is the job is running on a different runner, and hence it doesn't have access to that image. So let's give it some context. Okay, so it's given us some output. It says the build job is defined correctly. Make sure that the build job is defined correctly, which we have. Make sure the image is being tagged, which is correct, and if the build job is creating the image correctly. So let's look at this. So this job is building it, and this job is pushing it. So what's missing here is the link between those two, and the links are called artifacts. So because we are familiar with Docker or with GitLab pipelines, I'm gonna give it a little hint. Okay, so I could be wrong because here now it's talking about using GitLab images to, so you may not be able to. Okay, so now it's talking about the artifact image.tar. So I don't know where this image.tar comes from because it hasn't actually exported that image into image.tar. Let's ask for a full let's ask for a full template. Okay, it's using a before script, Docker image, and then push with the dependencies on build. So let's look at whether it was using dependency before. Okay, so it wasn't using dependency before. Okay, let's go back to using this entire. So essentially we've added the build dependencies. Okay, failed right away. Same error as before. So because we know that this error is there, we can just use deploy because we're familiar with this error by now. Okay. So the interesting part here is the first job runs. So it is able to provide enough context and enough scripts for YAML to be able to be parsed properly by GitLab. The issue seems to be that it's not able to connect those two jobs. And when you're initially starting out as a beginner to DevOps and beginner to GitLab pipelines, it can get a little daunting, I must say, because I've been able to provide it with a bit of a context around artifacts and using other tools like dependencies, but without that, it probably wouldn't have been able to represent proper GitLab pipeline for us. So it's still failing. Image doesn't exist locally. And it makes perfect sense because this job is running on a different runner. Let's give it another try. So I'm going to copy and paste the entire error. And so another problem, so it's recommended using the same name, which makes sense, right? So it turns out when you use said runners, you don't really need to export artifacts. But let's look at this commit reference name. So it's not, this commit reference name doesn't seem to have a value because repository gitlab registry.com image doesn't exist locally, right? So this image doesn't exist. So or your push job isn't correctly inherited the variable from the build job. You can add a dependencies property to the push, which we have added, I think. Dependencies, right? So build is building, and then push is pushing with a dependency for the build, which is what we have. So, but still, the problem persists in that it's not able to properly interpolate the tag. Now let's try to add master here directly and see whether this helps. So this has turned out to be more interesting than I thought, because it's able to give you a pipeline, but it's not really able to give you a working version. So, which is interesting. Job failed again. So image doesn't exist locally with the image tag. Now I wonder whether we can find a solution to it on Google. So as always, DuckDuckGo is useless. Okay, so we have to tag it and then push it. So now what we're doing is we're essentially trying to avoid the problem by pushing it in the same job. So let's copy this, and we're not going to need that anymore, and essentially just use the same same job to push it to the repository. Now at this point, I consider ChatGPT not really useful in helping us suggest a working version of pipeline, but what I'm doing is I'm using my context and my previous experience to solve this problem. But if you were starting from scratch and trying to use this tool to get your job done or learn, it may not be the right tool for you. So having said that, you may be able to ask it a lot of questions around what does artifact mean, or how do I use artifacts to pass it to another job. So things like that it may be able to answer, but it doesn't have the capacity to give you full solution. Okay, so this job is run and it's pushed the image into the GitLab registry. So let's look at the container registry. So as we can see, this image is now pushed to the GitLab container registry. So while you may not be able to use this ChatGPT tool to get an entire gitlab-ci YAML file and build a pipeline from scratch, but what you may be able to do is help you troubleshoot some issues, or ask quick questions around what's an artifact, or how do I build a container inside a pipeline. So I wouldn't recommend this tool for beginners because I had to use a lot of my own context and knowledge to be able to solve this problem. But if you're starting from scratch from somewhere else, from Google, for example, and looking at some of the examples online, and you want to understand what that does, you may be able to pass it to ChatGPT and it'll be able to sort of explain what the script does for you. So I hope that helps, and thanks for watching.